Being here. Um, I am working with the Fresco team on a bunch of stuff, brushes and things like that. And I also do live streams for Adobe and educational stuff and just all kinds of things. And I'm an illustrator, so nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. Um, how many of you, and it's hard for me with the spotlight in my face, but I'm going to try to do this. How many of you use Fresco? Cool. That's what I want. I want people who don't use Fresco to be here. Because the thing about Fresco is we launched it in 2019. And listen, I'm going to be honest. I'm a big fan of honesty and transparency. Fresco was totally underbaked when we launched it. It did not have enough features. People tried it, and they just told us so, and we knew it. We just wanted to get it out in the world. So, sometimes it's better to wait. But anyway, here's the thing people don't know. We are the fastest moving team in the whole company, and we update it every 6 weeks. Sometimes we update it in 4 weeks. So that means since 2019, we've had 100 plus updates to the app, which means we've added a ton of features, and we're going to add a bunch more. I'll even show you a little sneak peek of some stuff today, but what I want to show you today is sort of not just an overview of some of the newer things we've added in the past few months and everything, but also just point out a few features, because some of you are new to the app, that just make it special. All right, so I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to move to some of the new stuff. All right, so very quick overview, because we only have 50 minutes or so together, so I don't want to do like a sort of introduction to Fresco kind of thing. That's not what this is. But I will quickly point you to this. And Vicky, can we kill this light, please? Thanks. And also, shout out again, Vicky is a designer on Fresco team. The designers on Fresco are amazing. It's really hard to do UI, UX design. Anyone who's tried it knows this. Trying to like make an app for someone, have them open it, and then know where to go or figure out where to go. This is challenging. So great stuff. But anyway, also I told you earlier, Vicky is the one who had the idea to give you the nice lens cleaner microfiber cloths. Yeah. Okay, on the home screen, if you're familiar with Photoshop or any other Adobe app, everything's going to look familiar to you because this is where you're going to find your most recently used documents. Now, I want to quickly point out that one of the beautiful things about Fresco is that every single document you make in this app is automatically a Photoshop file. They're PSDs, which means there's zero friction between moving between Fresco, Illustrator, Photoshop, etc. If I make a file like this one here at the top, and I'm going to turn on my touch stuff for you all so you can see what's going on here. Now, I hate drawing like this, so I'm not going to do much drawing, but I'm going to have this blue circle follow me around, okay? It's hard to draw with a blue circle in your face, but now you know where I am on the screen. So like a document like this, if I were to open this in Fresco, do some doodling with it, I could literally just turn 30 degrees to my laptop, my Cintiq, and it'll just materialize on the screen. This happens both directions. So you have seamless round trip work with Photoshop, etc. And this is pretty amazing because you never have to worry about losing your work, first of all. But also because there are certain things you sometimes just want to do in Photoshop, like really heavy image editing, compositing, whatever it is. And there are certain things you only want to do in Fresco. Fresco is a laser targeted drawing and painting app. So the way I like to look at it is Photoshop, if you're an artist, if you're a visual artist and you do a lot of drawing, it's like you're driving this massive school bus and you basically use a couple of things on the dashboard and maybe like one row behind you, and then you have this huge row of empty seats because it's all the features you don't need in Photoshop. 3D and crazy image compositing stuff and like AI stuff and whatever. But if you use Fresco, It's like you're in this souped up Tesla. Every single feature is useful to you. It's all fresh and clean because you're a visual artist and this is what you need, and so you get that model. I love Photoshop, but Photoshop is enormous. And if you think about the rings of a tree and the fact that the app's like 30 years old, every single year they're adding stuff to it, and it just gets to be unwieldy. So if you want to draw, this is where I recommend you come. Second thing about why you should come here is it's free. There's a lot of confusion over Fresco pricing. Fresco's a free app. The features in the app are free. There's like 100 free brushes. All the vector brushes are free. All the live watercolors and oils are free. You get 2 gigs of cloud storage for free. It's ridiculous. But if you want 2,000 brushes, 20,000 fonts, 5 gigs of cloud storage, a ton of vector libraries, any color libraries you make or other assets you make, etc., it's $9.99 a year. Everyone thinks Adobe's like month. No, Fresco is $9.99 a year. This is a criminal thing. If you're not taking advantage of this, shame on you. It's 2 coffees, maybe 3 if you're a cheap guy who gets an espresso like me. All right, so anyway, I want to get that out of the way. So let's take a look at some of the basic stuff really quickly. I'm going to do overview. This is not what this course is. But you can make a document, very simple. And in Fresco, you got 3 categories of brushes. You have your pixel brushes. Those are all your Photoshop brushes. There's a bunch of categories here. I just created another 11 pencils for you all. The first pencil, which is the default pencil, works as you would expect. You can use pressure sensitivity to control how dark it is and all that. But you can also, of course, shade, very lovely, with tilt and with pressure recognition and all that. Everybody liked that pencil, but they and I were clamoring for more textures and more options, so that's why I went a little overboard and made 11 more. So now you're going to find those. You've got things like even pencil on canvas, which is really, really nice. Canvas. You got like a kind of a coal pencil, I call it, which is like this really gritty, charcoaly kind of thing, and all kinds of nice stuff. You got painting brushes. You've got all the good stuff like that, different categories. You've got effects brushes if you need to make things like, ink stains. I love this. Just drop some ink on the paper. Beautiful. That paper's a little damp, right? Isn't that fun? You've got, if you want to do more sort of oil painting kind of stuff, then you can grab something like a canvas brush, or maybe you want to do something more sort of like Georges Seurat, the wonderful French impressionist. Go ahead and grab the Seurat brush and start to do some pointillism. And if you want to increase the contrast with that, anybody who's familiar with brush settings in Photoshop or elsewhere, you can tap on your brush settings. You can open color dynamics, and you can increase the brightness jitter like that. And now it's going to be more intense. Okay, there you go. So this kind of stuff is all kind of what people expect from a drawing and painting app. But what we added that's special, and this is one of the things I love, is we have these live brushes. So that means you have wet watercolors. And when I say wet, what I mean is grab a color, and all you have to do is worry about how much paint's on your brush. How many people do watercolor, by the way? Not that many. I used to teach watercolor for 12 years. What I love about watercolor is you can pretty much control the medium with 2 things: how much water's on your brush and how much paint's on your brush. And that's about it. And if you know how to do those things, you're good. So we wanted to make Fresco that simple, and that's what we did. How much paint, how much water. That's it. So I'm going to use a ton of water and a decent amount of paint. And when I paint, the paint moves and it flows and it's lovely. And it just does all that watercolory stuff that we all love. It even leaves these nice kind of cauliflowery sort of patterns in the paint, right? And then if I grab another color and mix it, it all flows together. Very pretty. Okay? Notice, by the way, I'm using a 300 pixel brush here, and you're not seeing any lag. I'm going to crank that up to 768 pixels. No problem. Okay? So it's very, very zippy. The other thing, too, is you can wet anything. So if I use a Photoshop brush, all right, let's say, for example, I'll use something for inking, and I want to do like an ink and wash kind of a thing. So I'll grab the Blake pen, named after Quentin Blake, the great British children's book illustrator. I do some drawing, okay? And then I decide I want some of that line work to kind of diffuse and look like it's done with some damp paper. I put a little wash over it. just grab your watercolor brush, and I'll make it a little smaller, of course. You can take the color right out. You can just use pure water. And you use that with this little guy. This is our touch modifier. It does all kinds of stuff. Normally, if I'm drawing, okay, and I'm not using a watercolor brush, but I go back to that Blake brush, all I have to do is hold it down, and any brush I'm using instantly becomes an eraser with all the same texture and all the same properties of that brush. I can double tap it to lock it as an eraser. That's great. And I can double tap to go back. But if I am using watercolor, okay, and I'm going to use a lot less water here because I don't want to go crazy. See that? And I can reduce the flow. If I hold down the touch modifier, I'm painting with just pure water. So you can see how the line gets a little bit diffused right there. So if you're looking to try and do some like nice sort of ink wash stuff, or there's anything you want to wet on your canvas, you can do it. And that includes doing weird things you could never do with traditional media, like grab oil paints, okay? And we'll go ahead and crank this size up for this oil paint brush. Let's say I'm going to use some oils, and I'm going to use really thick paint. And with oils, you just control how thick the paint is and how much it mixes with what's on the canvas. Very simple. So I'll put some paint down. See that? Isn't that fun? But here's something I can't do with traditional media. I can mix it, and it's all beautiful and lovely. Isn't that nice? But then I'll grab some watercolor. This is weird. Okay. And I'm going to use a bit more water and make it a little more flow. And I'm just going to, again, with the touch modifier, I'm going to paint with water on watercolor. Isn't that weird? So I'm retaining the thickness of the paint. I'm zooming in crazy here, but you see what I'm talking about? So I'm actually taking that color, I'm just kind of like making it spread and bleed and do all kinds of stuff. Anything's fair game on the canvas. Yes, sir. It's always there. And the best thing is, I'm a lefty, so I keep it down here and I use my thumb. If you're a righty, you could do that. You can view it up here. You can put it anywhere you want on the screen at any time. You can lock it by double tapping it, or you can just hold it down. Either way. So if you're in a hurry, just hold it down, let go. But yeah, so there's all kinds of amazing natural media emulation you can do. I could do a whole 3-hour demo on just that, and I wish I had time to do that with y'all, but I don't. So what I want to do is quickly point out why this stuff is special and why it's interesting. The other thing I want to quickly point out is that every brush you have in your pixel brush category, every single one, the moment you import a brush into Fresco or the moment you use a brush, it's automatically available to you as a smudge tool as well, okay? So if you look here under library brushes, these are all the brushes I've added to Fresco in the past few months or whatever that I like to play with. It's about 400 brushes here total. Okay, I go a little overboard, obviously. But the moment I add that brush, look, it's in my smudge category, okay? And here's something super weird. Because I'm using thick paint that has lighting and it has height data, right? If I do something like grab a spatter brush, okay, and I decide I'm going to use it as a smudge tool, and I crank up the strength on that, right? So here's all this thick paint, and I go like this. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. It like basically makes an indent in the paint. Does that make sense? Like I'm indenting it, but I'm also pulling the color. Bloop. So there's some really weird, crazy, funky stuff you could do. Imagine taking, for example, a halftone brush, okay? So I'm going to smudge with halftones. Go to comics, halftones. Isn't that weird? So there's all this super weird stuff you could only do here. Okay? Very fun. Alrighty. Third category of brushes, vector brushes. How many here do vector art? Sweet. Okay. So I love Illustrator, but I really, really like to draw with vector brushes. I used to use Flash a lot to draw back in the day. This to me is the closest experience to that. Basically, just draw, okay? But of course, everything you make is infinitely scalable. It's resolution independent. So if I draw something the size of a postage stamp, I can blow it up to the size of a building and not worry about it, okay? The other thing is we have a bunch of vector brushes in here you don't get anywhere else. For example, we have brushes that actually have jitter, but they're vector brushes, right? So I don't know how our engineers did this, because that's not my job, but I asked if they could do it, and they said yes. So we now have vector brushes that have totally random jitter, all right? And you can control all this with the brush settings. So if you go to shape and outline, you want to like control the distance of the jitter, so how frequently you're going to see that, what's the size, all these kinds of things are completely editable. So everything's customizable. And I should mention that if you're like me, you play around with a lot of brushes and you're drawing in a document, and sometimes you do something and you're like, oh, that looks so cool. And an hour later, you're like, oh, how did I do that? Every single category of brushes has at the top this, recent brushes. We remember an unlimited number of brushes you use in your document in the exact order you use them, and it's sticky to the document. So if I open this a year from now, I will see every brush I used. And here's a cool thing I want to tell you that's coming up. We have an engineer right now who's working on this feature called brush recognition, where you can open a file and just tap anywhere on the file, and it'll tell you what brush you used at that moment in the document. Right? That's ridiculous. But anyway, I'm back over here with my vector brushes. If I go here and I go to recent, you'll see it shows me these are the two brushes you were just using. Okay. All my layer actions are my layers. I can just clear away all this data. Okay. Here's the other thing I want to quickly show you with vector brushes, and then I'm going to move on to some new stuff. Okay. We have a feature called vector trimming. This is super cool. If you want to draw something, I'm going to do like the worst. I've done this demo so many times at the booth where we are, and everyone's enjoying my really terrible cat drawing. And did I tell everyone I'm a professional illustrator? I swear it's true, I swear. Let's grab, actually that cat does have a bit of personality, right? I'm going to use a basic brush. We have so many brushes here, but I'm going to use the terminal brush. No, I'll use the chisel brush. Watch this. I'm like in a hurry and I'm super sloppy and I go stripe, 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 stripe. I'm going to make some stripes on this cat, okay? One over here for good measure. Now, if I had been taking my time, I would have had to try and line it up against the back, all that. Remember this little guy, touch modifier? Double tap and tap once more. I get the blue ring of magic. This means I can just draw through all the stuff I don't want, and it disappears. It immediately finds the closest neighboring line and just hacks away any of the extra stuff, and it does it perfectly. So what that means is, let's say I'm like super lazy and I want to draw a window, and I'm like, window, you know, and I just do this, this, this. Then I grab vector trimming mode, you know, just tidy it up. Boop, 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 boop. By the way, if you don't draw with sound effects, you're doing it wrong. Oh, look, I trimmed away too much. Bing. Again, I did it. I'm so bad. Sorry, I'm in a hurry, everybody. What do you think? Nice feature. Okay, now, that's the three categories of brushes. They do a lot of things. We even just recently, we're talking about new stuff, you know, so I want to make sure people know about this. We have manga brushes. These were designed with our Japanese audience. We have a team in Japan. We have a bunch of users in Japan, and we worked on these the G pen, mapping pen, drawing pen. So anybody that does like manga stuff, you'll appreciate how these brushes feel. They have a taper to them that's super nice. So if you're into the clean inking game, you're going to love these. We also have outline brushes. So any lettering artists in here, anybody who does lettering sometimes, cool. Outline brushes, super useful for this. Just grab any of the 13 outline brushes. For example, we have the medium pressure outline. Our vector brushes, by the way, can go super massive, 500 pixels. Like, I don't know why anybody would need that, but we just did it anyway. And then, hello? Grab my paint bucket tool, grab a color, and just drop it in. This is a huge time saver, okay? And there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with this. There you go. Any questions about three categories of brushes before I move on to some other features we've added recently that are super nice? Nope? Okay. Is anybody bored? Okay. You can sleep in here if you want. All right, let's look at some new stuff. So, most important thing, we build Fresco for you. We build Fresco for illustrators, for artists. And I swear this is exactly how it works. We have this new and upcoming features little section right here. And if you just scroll down to the bottom, it says suggest features right there. If you suggest a feature from within the app, It actually goes straight to the product marketing manager and the product manager, and we receive it directly as a team. We are a small, lean, mean team at Adobe. We do not take features and feature requests and shove them into a repository somewhere where somebody looks at it a month later. The way we do it is, if people are clamoring for something, we start to push that to the top of the list. And when it gets to a point where we're like, people really want this, we have engineers, we have designers, they're assigned to work on that, they collaborate, we build it, and we put it in the app. It's as simple as that. And that is why we have features currently in the app that people have asked for. Brush history, that was a feature request. And it's awesome. The vector trimming idea, that came from another Adobe request through other people, whatever. It's there now. People asked for it. We have it. The ability to organize all your files, which we just recently added. If you go to your files, you can now select files and you can delete them all at once or move things to folders, stuff like that. This is all coming from you, okay? And the features I'm about to show you, a lot of these come from users. So please keep that in mind. If there's something you want, definitely make some noise. Another thing you can always do is hit me up on Twitter, @KyleTWebster. Twitter is my most responsive place. I get a ton of messages on Instagram, but I really don't read most of them because Instagram's messaging is so annoying and it's not fun to get to. Twitter's direct. You know, I see it, it's at me, I can do it. So if you have ideas, just shoot them to me, or best thing is to come into the app and make a request. So for example, animation. Let's talk about motion in Fresco. This is one of my favorite things. We'll open up the cat in the boat. All right, so here's our kitty cat in the boat. He shouldn't smoke, but you know, maybe it doesn't affect him. And this is what I want to show you. We have a combination of animation features in here. They're excellent. So first, frame-by-frame animation. Frame-by-frame animation, if you're not familiar with it, is you draw a frame, you add another frame, you draw a frame. I think most people in this room probably big fans of animation. And our frame-by-frame animation in Fresco, one of the things I love about it is it's got a horizontal timeline, and all of your frames are stored in a single layer right here. Notice how I don't have a layer stack that I have to try and deal with for frame by frame by frame by frame. The frames are just here on that layer. We have unlimited layers in Fresco. There is no layer limit. Now, if you bump up against the limit, it's because your iPad has caught fire. We didn't make that happen, but I'm just saying, we're not going to limit you. You can keep creating layers until something happens, but we just never put a limit on it. So let's say you want to have 30 or 40 layers, each with their own animation timeline, with their own asset that's animating. You can totally do that. They're super easy to organize. You just grab a layer, move it up and down. You can transform everything on that layer at once, all the frames at once, a single frame at once. Everything is flexible. But this is my basic frame-by-frame animation, okay? And I have my onion skinning, right? Very easy, so I can see my previous frames all the way up to 10 previous or upcoming frames. Opacity control for onion skinning. And we're going to add colors for onion skinning as well. That's coming up very soon. Again, that was a user request, so we take those seriously, okay? You have a document timeline. You can see exactly how many frames are in the entire animation. See here? This guy is my document timeline, so I can see what's going on, all right? So that's frame-by-frame animation, but this is where things are really super interesting. Let's tap on this bird right here, okay? Now, if you're doing frame-by-frame, how many people do animation here, frame-by-frame, that kind of thing? Okay, not a lot. But those of you who do are going to appreciate this. Let's imagine that I'm an animator and I want the bird, okay, to move like this way, that way, up there, this way, that way. How would I do that? I would have to make frame, right? In Fresco, you just tap on path and just draw it. That's it, okay? And then you come over here and you change all these nice properties. Now, the reason he's not following it completely perfectly is because I have crazy stuff going on here with multiples, scattering, randomizing. There's my flock of birds. That took 2 seconds. That is 100% exportable. You can even convert it all to frames if you want, frame by frame. Convert the whole layer to frames. Send it out at scale. If you do a 4,000, 8,000 by 8,000 pixel document and want to export that as an MP4, you can. Export it as a GIF, you can. Export it as a PNG sequence, you can. You can control the speed. You can have different speeds for motion paths on different layers, right? So if you're somebody who understands animation, you work on counts, and you're like, I'm working on a count of 8 or whatever, you want to have certain things move on 16, certain things moving on 32, go ahead and do it and organize it by layers, okay? But if I want to cancel that out, I just close the path. I can copy that path and I can paste it to other layers and have a completely identical animation. I can move that path along the screen. And then I can just have everything move at once, right? So I've got these other birds on different layers. I can have them grow and shrink in size. I can control how many times that happens along the length of the path. It's a million things you can do with animation here, and they're super zippy. So that's a combination of frame-by-frame animation and motion. You may be wondering, can I do a frame-by-frame animation on a layer and assign a path to that frame-by-frame? You absolutely can. You can have 100 layers, or 100 frames, pardon me, of animation for a certain character or for a certain element, and then you want that thing to walk left or right or go in a circle or whatever, you can totally do that. In fact, this is one of my favorite things to show. If I want something to perfectly follow along the direction of a path, I can do this. So watch. I draw an arrow, okay? Weirdest arrow you ever saw. I'm using a halftone brush, right? In fact, I'll do that one more time. It'll still look weird, but whatever, who cares? There's my arrow. Now, I decide I want to animate that arrow, okay? And I want it to go in a circle like that. But that's not what I want, right? So then I come here and I say align to path. Just turn that on. Boom. So you can have things move in a directional way. It's amazing. I'll just draw another one here. I'll draw another one here. Right? No problem. And the craziest thing of all, save for last. Here we go. Let's draw this. Very exciting. Let's just pretend it's like a ball or something, okay? And I say path. Now what I want to happen is I want this ball to move upwards. Okay, I'm going to just draw for a second. I'm going to go upwards like this, bounce down, and then bounce up. Now if you're doing that with frame-by-frame animation, you would have to do timing, right? Slow, fast, slow. Check this out. Slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. Now hold on. If I go here to speed options, that's not what I want. Uniform speed, but look at this. Original speed, it recorded what I did with my hand. So slow, fast, slow, fast. Perfect. Then I just make it faster here. Ba-dump, ba-dump. Faster. Ba-dump, 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 ba-dump. Isn't that ridiculous? Well, you could just do frame by frame if you want, but don't worry because squash and stretch is actually coming. Just like right now, we have a simple ease in, ease out right here. See that? Ease in, ease out. We're going to have more easing options. Do you know why? Because people asked for it. Yes? No, because if you're doing frame by frame, your timing would have to be perfect for it to squash that moment. So we want to make it so that we know how to make you control it with these options. We're trying to make it so that for certain things like that animators do all the time, you don't have to deal with the frame by frame component, depending on the complexity of the object. And then the other thing is people who do animatics and storyboards, right? One of the great things about this, if you have this kind of ability to do simple animation, or you're doing like VizDev or whatever, like let's say I'm doing an animation thing, I'm working with the art directors and I'm like, okay, here's this is a shot for blah, 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 right? Okay, main characters outside the hotel, whatever. And then the fact that I can do stuff like this, like it's raining, the lights are flashing a little bit, right? That just brings enough life to it to really sell the concept. And for me, to do that rain, look, can you see there's like 12 little raindrops? But because I used that multiply and scatter and randomize, I'm able to do like actual falling rain. And if you look here, where the rain hits the ground, I don't know if you can see that, there's these little puddles and stuff. I just drew one of those. And then I do a little motion path like this and scatter those around the ground. So the idea is to try and save you time. It's an efficiency thing, but it's also like a practical thing for just simple animation. Lots of stuff with animation, so there you go. Tools that people use a lot in Photoshop. We wanted to use them here, but in a little more practical way. So an example of that would be, open this up. Anybody here use the magic wand for stuff? Yeah, magic wand is useful. But one of the things that's not so great about it is you make a selection, and if you haven't nailed kind of the tolerance, what do you have to do? Deselect, adjust tolerance, so we've made that dynamic in Fresco. So if, for example, I want to select the green right here, right? Well, look, nailed it. But what if I want to select the green and the tree? Now, if you look at these colors, they're very similar. So I should be able to increase that tolerance. And right here, I do so while it's selected, and it just goes ahead and grabs both. So you have a dynamic magic wand. You can readjust that back and say, no, I think I just want the leaves. Okay? And once I know it's good, I can just go through and start selecting. Okay? And yes, before you ask, we are going to be adding contiguous or non-contiguous, whatever the one is, that makes it so that you can select all of this in any part of the document. But once I've done that, I can go ahead and grab that layer, and I can say duplicate selection. There it is. Now it's on its own layer. And yes, we have non-destructive workflows in Fresco. So if you want to do a color adjustment, right, to those leaves, so I want it to be fall, for example, I just tap over here and I get my adjustment layers. Let's do hue and saturation. We're going to make it more fall. Okay, bump up the saturation. There we go. Now the problem is, look what it did. It adjusted the tree too. No problem. Just clip it. So clipping masks work with one tap. Boom, you're done. So now I've just adjusted that one layer. I've adjusted it for the leaves, and I'm good to go. Dynamic color margin for Magic Wand. Okay. That's a nice feature. Let's move on, and we'll look at how we adjusted another feature for you, which is liquify. How many people use liquify? Liquify is like sculpting your 2D art. So here's this guy I painted, which, by the way, once I finished painting it, I thought, am I ripping off Bobby Chiu? It's very Chiu. This is a very Chiu painting. So sorry, Bobby. But it is a great demo for liquify because, you got a character that you could really mess around with. So for transform, okay, you just go to transform. This is what I love, is everything in Fresco is tight. Now, if I'm working in Photoshop, and don't get me wrong, Photoshop made my career. I love Photoshop. But, if you want to do liquify, open up a separate window, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of... If you're an artist, when you use liquify, it's usually to do a few simple things to reshape and organize things. And here's what we do. Liquify, boom. That's all you get. Everything you need is right here. You want to warp, you warp. Okay? Undo, undo, undo. If you want to reconstruct something, so if I want to do this, warp, 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 and then I want to reconstruct, I just paint until it's all back to normal. Okay? If you want to smooth something out, you smooth it out. If you want to twirl it, whatever, you twirl it. Okay? And so here's what my art director says. Okay, make the eyes bigger. He's not cute enough, so I go to bloat. Just make the eyes bigger. Do you want to, I didn't get that at the center, poor guy. There we go. Yeah, you want to push around and mess around with this forehead shape. Just resculpt that. Okay, cool. Done. Now, with reconstruct, what's great is I can just modify parts of the image I've already changed while leaving other parts still edited or transformed. So if I want to leave the eye big, but then the art director's like, nah, let's get that head back. So then I come back over here. I just paint in the area that I want to reconstruct. It's going to leave that eye alone. Okay? Everything you can do with liquify, of course, you have your settings, right? So the density of the liquify, so how intense is that going to be? Pressure, yes, it's going to respond to pen pressure very nicely. And the speed at which it happens is controlled right here. And that is all you need. And you've got liquify right there. And when you're done, you just say done and you keep moving on. You notice how responsive it was too. No lag, zippy zippy. Okay? That's liquify. Okay. Perspective drawing. Who needs to draw in perspective? Most people, yeah. I do a lot. So the basics of it are exactly what you would expect. You have the ability to draw in perspective by using perspective grids. Right here, you have your precision panel, okay? In addition to the grids and stuff like that, you have the ability to turn on snapping and alignment guides and things like that, okay? But for the grids, you have a graph and you have a perspective grid. Very simple. You can edit your vanishing points. Okay, you notice I used a tilted horizon line on this one, so it's a little bit more dynamic and exciting. But all you have to do is drag these wherever you want and mess around with those. Very simple. Cancel out of that. And what I really, really like about this is the ability to choose when you want to draw with guided perspective and when you don't, and to be able to do it with one tap. Instead of opening a menu, choosing an option, I don't want to do that. I just want to immediately go back and forth, okay? And so I can do that. Right now, I'm snapping. See this? Snap to grid. Don't snap to grid. Turn it on, turn it off. It's that simple. I leave that panel open, and I just draw in perspective, blah, blah, blah. Everything's perfect. Then I decide I don't need it, so I turn it off, and I make this little emblem or whatever on the side with some stuff, whatever. Okay? So it's that easy. This works with watercolor. It works with oils. It works with vector brushes. If you want to draw in perfect perspective with vector, just go ahead. Every single brush works with perspective. And then we went a step beyond that, and we decided, wouldn't it be cool if somebody has to build out a scene? Somebody gives you a starting point. Maybe an artist gives you a drawing. Maybe somebody gives you a photo for reference. And they're like, we need to expand this. It's kind of the general idea we're going for, but we need bigger. So somebody gives me, for example, a photo like this, right? Now, if I look at this photo, I would guess it's a one-point perspective photo. If you look at my perspective grid, it's always going to pull up the most recent grid you were using. So this grid is not working for me. Right now, if I go to one-point perspective, I can like mess around with it. And oh, it nailed it pretty fast. But here's what I'm going to do. See down here? Create perspective grid from an image, a layer, or a document. I'm just going to hit layer. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. There you go. Layer. Boom. And it totally got it perfect. This works for anything. If you have a three-point perspective photograph, you bring it in, and you want to take that photo and build a perspective grid on it, you just simply go to Create Perspective Grid, and then you would tap on Image from the image that you just imported. You can do it from a layer. You can do it from an entirely separate Photoshop document or Fresco document. Just bring it in and create a perspective grid on the fly. Works every time. So that is a nice feature. So while we were thinking about things being automatic, we also made it possible that if you bring a photo in, you instantly create a nice 35 color palette. Or is it 30 colors? Vicky, are you there? 30 or 35? 32. See, I guess I'm fired. But yeah, so if I create a document and then I say, let's go to my photos, and here's a nice photo. Okay. The moment I bring the photo in, look, color palette created. I come over here, there it is. And it's going to intelligently look all around the photo and try and pick a nice range of light, medium, and dark values, and a nice color range, and things like that, and then you're good to go. So that's wonderful. And speaking of colors, have you noticed that when I'm painting, okay, so let's say I do this, and then I do this, and I grab this, and I'm just kind of bouncing around, okay? When I'm painting, every single color gets remembered right here. We have an unlimited color history for your document, which is also sticky to the document. So if I open this up a year from now, all my color history is right there, but not just single colors. Because one of the magical things you can do in Fresco is put anything on a brush and paint with it. Multiple colors, a photo, whatever you want. Let me show you what I mean. So if I grab, for example, let's go to the painting category. I love this brush, the block stain brush. Put some color here. And let's do this. And let's do this. And let's do that. And let's do one more. Maybe something like that. Okay. There are some nice colors. Remember this guy, the touch modifier? Now, normally if I touch my finger anywhere, I get the eyedropper. Totally customizable, by the way. This is something somebody asked me the other day, and I was so glad to tell them that yes, if you're one of those people that paints in a real hurry and are used to like picking colors with the Option key in Photoshop, for example, or Alt, right? You don't want to do this and wait 0.3 seconds. That's a long time. So go to App Settings, Input, okay? See where it says long press for eyedropper? I've got that turned on. Oh my gosh, I have 0.4 seconds. That's like an eternity. Just knock it down to 0.1. Boom, 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 boom. Everything's customizable. What about those of you who have a heavy hand when you draw? And you're drawing and everything's always too fat, too fast. Or you're not getting the texture you want because you're like bearing down. And you just can't control it because you have a heavy drawing hand. People all draw differently. Just open up your brush settings, go to Stylus Pressure, and we have 6 lovely presets for you. So if you are those heavy-handed people, you can test that out and see how it feels right here. If you want it light, you can test that out and see how it feels right here. If you want something in between. Or maybe you're one of those really fancy people that knows how to build like super awesome pressure curves. Just go ahead and start like building your fancy curve and see how that feels. Okay? There you go. All right, but back to the color magic. So here I am getting my colors. Okay? Now, if I hold the touch modifier down and do the same thing, can you all see my color picker over here? It just grabbed all those colors at once. Simple as that. Now, why don't we have some fun and we'll go to like an oil brush, right? Totally doable. Now, I'm just being weird with this, but imagine the practical uses for this. If you want to have a really lovely, subtle, painterly kind of thing going on, you can do that, right? But you can also just do crazy stuff like this. Now, on the crazy side, we decided to be fun to give you some inspiration and give you some ideas by including right here are my recent colors. When you go to all colors, there's this Fresco colors right here. We have about 30 multicolor swatches for you to try here. So you can get an idea of what it's like to paint with those. And if you use something like a simple basic brush, you can see how fun it is to do this kind of stuff. Now, for all those lettering people out there, I'm sure you're getting some ideas, right? So, you know, light box, barely fit. Goop. Isn't that fun? Now there's a whole ton of those to play around with. Did I mention Fresco's free? I like this one. Okay, so how do I build those? Well, it's simple. I just did that. I designed that thing, made it into a stamp, and when I draw with it, this is what it does when I'm using a basic round brush, right? But again, you can use any brush with that. So here's oils. And because I have color mixing turned on, see how it eventually just kind of blends everything together, right? If you don't want it to do that, remember, you can turn the mixing off all the way. Now I'm just using fresh paint every time. Nothing's going to blend with anything. It's going to just stay whatever it is. But it's still going to have thickness and dimension and craziness, okay? All right, clear that away. Yes, it works for watercolor. So, you know, crank up that water. Imagine doing a graded wash with like just a subtle change in color all the way through. You can do all these things. I'm not showing you like painterly practical things. I'm showing you weird things. But you start getting your brain moving on this and think about the ways you can emulate gouache, watercolor, you know, oils, etc. Or just do things that are practical for your work. For example, what if I want to do this? Remember the arrow thing I was doing a second ago? So let's just do this. I'll just, you know, paint an arrow. Okay. Why can't I paint good arrows? And look, I can control how much of the canvas I select with a multicolor selection with the eyedropper and the zoom. Pinch, zoom, pinch, zoom. Boop. So I go back to like maybe this size, hold this down, and select. Oh, I can go bigger than that. There we go. Look, it's right there. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to make an arrow? Because I can open my brush settings right here. increase my spacing. See that? And make the size bigger. And make like an arrow brush, right? So maybe I have to do some dashes or some arrows or some kind of decoration or some kind of a pattern for something. Imagine you have to do some pattern design really quickly and it's got like triangles or some repeating thing. Just make a stamp out of it and just start painting. I know what you're asking. Yes. Kyle, I like this Cheese Whiz brush, but I want it to be blue. What am I going to do? So here's what you do. You go to the Cheese Whiz brush, okay? And here's what it looks like, right? Just open up your color picker and go to your HSB sliders, hue, saturation, and brightness, and every single color relationship that's in that stamp is going to be remembered. And when I slide it over here, it's going to magically change all the relationships in every color in that swatch simultaneously along that path and then create a different version of it. So you do not have to worry about being limited, right? I can do this, I can do that. That's weird, right? You want to decrease brightness, you want to increase saturation, increase brightness. It's still going to remember the relationships that you had to begin with, okay? Nothing's changing there. See that? So that means if you do make a swatch that you really, really love for painting, that's much more practical than all this weird stuff, you can simply adjust the HSB sliders and keep painting and use that, right? And the example I always like to use is in the painting category, there's this nice brush called Wet Bristle. And let's do this. I'm going to use blue. And before I use that brush, I'm going to put down some color with this block stain brush here. Make it bigger. There we go. Okay. Now I'll zoom in, and I'm going to do a darker color over it like that. Okay. Now that's got some nice kind of textural business going on. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about with subtlety. If I go ahead and select this as a swatch, then I come and I select a brush like the Wet Bristle brush and paint with it. See all that nice variation that I'm getting? It's very, very natural and lovely to look at, right? And you just can't do that without a multicolor swatch. There's no way. But it's super practical for painting. And I've done entire paintings with beautiful effects where I want to like paint like some water or something, and I just do this one pass like that. And I can see all the bristles and all the brush marks in there. Make my brush really big and pass over it like that and do really pretty things like that. That's one brush, but it's using multiple colors at once in a subtle way to do cool stuff. Any questions about the multicolor business? All good. It's right here in my color history. See that? It remembers them. You mean in order to select multiple colors at once to put them on the brush? Yes, I just hold down the touch modifier, and then with my other finger, I do eyedropper. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. So look, I'll put some color here. I want to select these colors together, and maybe I'm drinking coffee and I'm drawing and I don't want to use a touch modifier. Go to your eyedropper tool right here and just change the mode here to multicolor. Now I can just drag anywhere on the screen and I'm going to do multicolor swatch. So you always have options with the tools where you don't have to use the touch modifier if you don't want to. But I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in Fresco. And a lot of apps, if you want to learn them, you go to YouTube, you go to TikTok, whatever. In Fresco, anything you want to learn, you can learn directly in the app. You don't have to go anywhere. You just go to Learn right here. We have these amazing walkthrough tours that open actual art as a file. Got questions here you can be answered. Go next. Shows you where your brushes are. Go next. Shows you what each one does. Walks you through the basics of the setup and your UI and everything you need to know You can try stuff on the document. Okay, go back. And we also have 11 videos you can watch, or 10 videos, pardon me, I can't count. I was good at 2 things in college, math, science, and art. It's a dumb joke. Want to hear another dumb joke? If at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you. Okay. But yeah, you can learn anything right in the app. So that's a very nice thing. Right. Okay, moving on. You asked for it. It was a no-brainer. We were going to build it anyway, but I'm glad we did because we need it. Yeah, free transform and all that business is lovely. It's right here. So, of course, if I have this crab and I'm building a crab shack illustration, I need to put the crab logo on the sign. That's a problem. So we just go to distort, and then I can just grab it and drag every corner where it needs to go, and we're good to go. There we go. Okay. Free transform is there. Works beautifully. And reference layer fill, because everybody wants that. And if you don't know what that is, it means that for those of you who do line art with flat color or line art with color, you know that one of the biggest annoyances is that you have to keep your line art separate from your color. And you don't want to make your line art and then on a layer underneath be doing this all day and coloring it in, or making a selection, and all that. Okay, that's no fun. So instead, what you want to do is use a paint bucket tool. But if you use the paint bucket tool, then you're on the same layer, and then it's whatever. So instead, what you do is you grab your line art, okay, and you just say make reference layer. Here, set as reference. Okay, blam. Now, any other layer in the document or any layer you create thereafter will use the boundaries of that line art to fill the color. So I'm on a separate layer now. I'll give this guy green here. And there you go. Separate layer. This will save you hours of time, right? Hours of time. Just fill, fill, fill. Super easy. Now, I'm doing this on a vector layer, so of course it's perfect. So you may be wondering, what about pixel layers? And yes, don't worry, works for pixel layers as well. And I'll show you how that works, okay? But first I'm just feeling like I need to finish this with weird colors. Okay, now what do you do with pixel layers? Let's go ahead and try it, okay? Remember the magic wand and how it's dynamic and all that good stuff? By the way, we have like 1 minute left, right? We have 10 minutes? Woo! Oh, 0 or 10? Oh, we're done? Okay, quickly. Pixel brushes. By the way, this is the last thing I want to show you, so we're good. And if you want to stick around after and ask me questions, please do. Okay, I'm not going anywhere. Here, blank pen. Okay. I make a thing. This is terrible. Oh, gosh. Come on, guys. Kyle, get it together. All right, here. I'm going to make a head. It's going to be me. There. It's me. But I'll give myself some hair. All right, and a t-shirt, whatever. What do? Set as reference. Now, it's dynamic, so grab a color. When you tap to fill, here we go. You don't want the little gray pixels, right? Everyone's running into this problem. What do? Increase the color margin. They're gone. So now it remembers my settings, and I just tap, 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 fill, fill, fill. Everything's perfect. Ta-da! I think I covered it all, but wow, you guys, we update this app so often, it's just insane. Please download it. It's free. Enjoy it. You can go up to 8K documents, 8,000 by 8,000. That's 24 inches square, 300 DPI. Round trip with Photoshop, animation. $10 a year if you want a whole bunch of extra brushes and fonts and things. I think you can do it. Thank you for your time.